Hello everyone, my name is Sonali. I'm a lecturer in the Department of English Language and Literature at Premier University. I wholeheartedly welcome you all to watch the second episode of our online series, Universal Shakespeare. From the introductory speech given by our honorable mentor, Professor Dr. Moidul Alam Sir, delivered in the first episode, you already know that we plan to offer different strokes for different folks in different episodes. In today's episode, 5 of our respected faculty members will be presenting William Shakespeare and his works from 5 different angles. And then 2 of our students will perform different scenes from William Shakespeare's plays. Let me just reveal the outline of today's program. The first discussant is the chairman of the department, Assistant Professor Sadat Zaman Khan. He will discuss Ecocriticism and Shakespeare. The second discussant, Shahnaz Parvin, Assistant Professor of DEL, will contextualize the bird in her discussion titled Shakespeare in Bangladesh. After her speech, Assistant Professor Syed Jashim Uddin will bring Shakespeare's sources to the table of discussion. After that, Assistant Professor Ghazi Shahadat Hossain will make a connection between Shakespeare and pandemic. And finally, Assistant Professor Rafiqul will talk on a very interesting topic, Shakespeare and chess. After the speeches, one of our students from 33rd batch, Muhammad Zaman Khan, will showcase the 5th soliloquy from the play Hamlet. And after his presentation, another student from 33rd batch, Tasnuva Khan Tanisha, will perform the sleepwalking scene from the play Macbeth. I utterly thank Assistant Professor Shahnaz for her brilliant and incredible direction, which will surely appear as an explosion of her own spark. Dear viewers, let's enjoy the brainstorming yet entertaining second episode of Universal Shakespeare.
A very warm welcome to you all. It's a pleasure to talk about Shakespeare and environment. Although we cannot say that Shakespeare had a great concern about the environment and he, to an extent, was an environmentalist, these things cannot be told because the kind of problems we are facing now, the ecological problem, the greenhouse gas emission, and creating carbon footprint, etc., and the way that the greenhouse has been affected, the rise of the sea level, etc. These things were not there in Shakespeare's time. Therefore, the concerns for ecology were not as much widespread as it is now. But in spite of the fact that we can't really ignore the fact that Shakespeare had some kind of concerns for ecology too, in different ways. We can't say that Shakespeare was an environmentalist, but Shakespeare had some concerns about environment, and in many a way he expressed that through his plays and sonnets. Before I go into analyze what are some of the important relationships that we find in Shakespeare's literature where nature has been the center of attention, we need to know what is basically ecocriticism. So it is a remark of the Glotfelty that tells that ecocriticism is a study of the relationship between nature and the physical environment. So that's what it is very important. And he also tells that just as feminist criticism examines language and literature from a gender-conscious perspective, and Marxist criticism brings an awareness of the modes of production and economic class to its reading of the text. By the same token, ecocriticism takes an art-centered approach to literary studies. So it is an art-centered approach that it tells that the art should be in the center when we read the text, and we would try to analyze the text from that particular perspective. In trying to find out some of the important relationship, we can talk about some of the Shakespeare's comedies, for example, are very beautiful and wonderfully written, and there are certain important things which talks about the nature, which lifts nature by its own token. For example, if we go into the wonderful comedy As You Like It, we can find there are certain things which are directly related to ecology. For example, Dulcinea tells when he is banished by his brother, he goes with his followers into the forest of Uddin, and here he tells, "Now, my co-mates and brothers in exile, hath not old custom made this life more sweet than that of the painted pop? Are not these woods more free from peril than the envious courts?" So it's a pastoral comedy. We know that there's always a kind of emancipation of pastoral things, but along with these concerns, we can also find how Dio criticizes the court life against how he criticizes the court life and lifts the country life, where he tells that it is free from all the evils and malice of the court life, and therefore this life is even more enjoyable. So in his tone, we do not find a kind of frustration that he's been totally deprived of the rightful claim of his kingdom, but we don't find that kind of depression in his tone when he talks about that. Rather, we find he tells that sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his head. And this our life, exempt from the public hunt, finds tongues in the trees, books in the running brooks, summons in the stones, and good in everything. So living in the nature itself becomes rather a kind of celebratory factor. He rather celebrates, and he's trying to identify himself with the sights and sounds of nature, and he's trying to tell all these things by himself realizing the fact that nature is not only an abode for him, but it is rather a very important, potent force. It does have a certain kind of capacity to captivate human being, and that is what he expresses through his we also find it through the play. Nature possesses almost a magical quality. Yes, that is there, because in the nature we find the reconciliation of the play that really takes place, and the characters discordances that gets to a kind of harmony, and that is once again in this wonderful natural pastoral environment. So it is very important. On the other hand, from the Amiens speech, we find when he calls forth the people, he tells that under the greenwood tree who loves to lie with me, come hither, come hither, come hither. Under the greenwood tree who loves to lie with me and turn his merry note unto the sweet bird's throat. That's a very important thing, that you are trying to identify yourself with the bird, the merry note of the bird, and thus you are trying to create a bond. And that is actually one of the most important things in the ecological studies, to understand, if not the language of the birds and beasts, but understand the way they live in the nature. That is very important. So once again we find that some ecological concerns have been there, and he talks about only two manageable enemy, which is winter and rough weather. That he tells that here shall he see no enemy but winter and rough weather. But these are manageable enemies, like not a kind of arch enemy, the way it's going to really harm you. So these are manageable, because he tells that sweet are the uses of adversity. There are certain adverse things, that's for sure, but still these are sweet. I mean, if you can accommodate yourself with these things. So this is very important. Once again, let us turn our attention to Macbeth, where he tells that right in the beginning, when we draw our attention to the lines, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and fill the air. All right. Although this remark is more political, but we can really explain that from an ecological perspective. That it is very predictive of a kind of apocalyptic system which is going to engross the entire state and future. So this is how they are going to overrun everything, and this prediction also is equally true to the environment, that we cannot really, for example, in the modern context, if you say that yes, what was fair is now getting foul in terms of eco balance, what was good, it was not so much. So if we talk about the future, if the greenhouse emission gets through the humanity like that into the environment. So this is how things are rather being connected. We can connect it in that way. So once again, if we look our attention to As You Like It, where we also find Jacques is a character. I would rather like to say that Jacques is an environmentalist in a way. Why? Because Jacques is more saddened by the hunting of the deer, and we literally see him crying, observing that terrible sight. That he tells at one point, he tells that the most inevitably he pierced through the body of the country, city, court, and of this our life, swearing that we are more usurpers, tyrant, and what worse, to fight the animals and kill them up. So that is the concern, that if the animals are they're the natural citizens, and definitely the human beings, though they are exiled and trying to take a space into the forest, but still these human agents are corrupting a very sylvan society, a very pristine natural environment, and they are usurpers, he tells. A very strong word. Look at that, usurpers. We are usurping and we are piercing that wonderful balance, and that texture's been corrupted. So these things are rather told. In King Lear we also find that the human sentiment is expressed in the storm when King Lear gets out of the house of Goneril and Regan, where he finds that he's been tormented by the weather, that he feels that there's a storm outside and there's a storm inside. So he's identifying himself with nature and therefore expressing his grief and blasting out his grief. And he at one point tells that sinned more against than sinning. He's been more punished than what he deserves. That's exactly how he expresses his sentiment in terms of the environment. So this is how it rather goes on. And also we find that in another beautiful play of William Shakespeare, in Midsummer Night's Dream, where once again the reconciliation that takes place in the nature. But look at the names, the way that namings are done. The Titania's retinue of soldiers, for example, the Titania's followers. And for example, these are the peas bosom, cobweb, moth, mustard seed, as a part of non-human nature, all right? But at the same time, these non-human characters are to an extent identifying themselves with nature, and that's exactly how it's running through. So that is where we can really find, once again, Titania at one point tells that with thy brawls thou hast disturbed our sport, therefore the winds piping to us in vain, as in revenge, have sucked up from the sea contagious frogs, and plowman lost his sweat, and the green corn hath rotted ere his yacht attained a bread. Although it is a remark that really identifies, for example, certain important facts in the play, but it does have a kind of historical connection. So these remarks that proves that during Elizabethan period there was a grain shortage, and there was a bad harvest, cold weather, and a profound storm, and the great forest of 1607 to 8, which had been recreated in King Lear, was the consequence of the coal burning and the deforestation for the burgeoning industrial revolution. So that is how there are certain historical connections, and there are certain historical events about which Shakespeare was quite aware, and he, in a very indirect way, tried to bring into his literature and trying to give them an important voice. And if the voices are not very explicit, but very implicitly, in a very nice way, in an aesthetic way, he tries to bring all these voices. And if we try to trace out those voices, we will surely be able to find those from Shakespeare's plays and sonnets. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Hope you will have a great time.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Shahnaz Parvin, Assistant Professor, Department of English Language and Literature, Premier University. I am here to say a few words about the adaptations of William Shakespeare in Bangladesh. But before that, I'd like to pay my gratitude to our Honorable VC Sir, renowned social scientist and Ekushé Padak winner, Professor Dr. Anupam Sen Sir, for his kind consent to celebrate 457th birth anniversary of the Bird of Avon, William Shakespeare. I am also thankful to my dear mentor, Dean, Faculty of Arts and Social Science, and Professor, Department of English Language and Literature, Premier University, Chittagong, Professor Dr. Muhidur Alam Sir, for his continuous intellectual support and guidelines to make the program successful amidst this pandemic. Dear audience, as you know that many people of my age at their early childhood would love to listen to the story The King and His Three Daughters. I can remember I used to ask my mom to repeat the story Loboner Moto Bhalobasha. Again, in the mid-80s, we enjoyed a TV drama Mukhura Ramani Boshikaran by Professor Munir Chaudhary. I can remember the powerful acting of Firdausi Mojumdar. When I got admission in the Department of English, Chittagong University, I found the connectivity of King Lear in Laboner Moto Bhalobasha and The Taming of the Shrew, where I have got the flavor of Mukhura Ramani Boshikaran. So, my dear audience, that is how the Bard of Avon's plays have left thousands of his readers and audiences of Bangladesh spellbound. It is owed to say that to a standard number of people in Bangladesh reading and watching Shakespeare's creations, it can be considered as hobby. Shakespeare had been entering to the minds of the Bengal since the British colonial period. As Professor Mohidul Alam said, to colonize the mind of the subcontinent, the colonizers had tried every possible way. And to me, the introduction of William Shakespeare to us is a kind of blessing. For the elite class of the subcontinental society, plays were first translated in Bangla around 1850. Gradually, remarkable adaptations had been done by Bharatendu Horish Chandra's Durlabh Bandhu, translation of The Merchant of Venice, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar's Phranti Bilash, the adaptation of Shakespeare's The Comedy of Errors, and Utpal Datta's on-stage play Ajker Shahjahan, the adaptation of King Lear. In Bangladesh, just before the independence, Professor Munir Chaudhary translated The Taming of the Shrew, as I have already mentioned, in the name of Mukhura Ramani Boshikaran. Later on, he tried to translate Othello, but he could not complete it. His brother, Professor Kabir Chaudhary, completed the translation of Othello. In the independent Bangladesh, there are many eminent scholars who have been writing scholarly articles, translating Shakespeare's plays and sonnets, editing all the tragedies and comedies. With due respect to them, I would like to mention some of their names. When I was a student of the Department of English, Chittagong University, I received a book, Shakespeare Mera, written by the eminent professor of Bangladesh, Professor Dr. Sirajul Islam Sir. That book helped me immensely to know about the in-depth characteristics of William Shakespeare's females. I believe still today the students would love to read the book of Professor Sirajul Islam Chaudhary. Professor Mohidul Alam has translated almost 10 tragedies and comedies of William Shakespeare in Bangla. He has edited Hamlet and Macbeth from Albatross Classics. Very recently, he has translated in the verse form As You Like It. So his edited version of Hamlet can be considered as the most supportive text to the students, with lots of references that would make the text very well understandable to the students. Therefore, there are many more respected Shakespeare scholars like Professor Imtiaz Habib, Professor Zilur Rahman Siddiqui, Abu Shahriar, Syed Shamsul Haq, Shamsur Rahman, Professor Salim Sarar, Professor Fakrul Alam, Professor Qazi Mustain Billah, Professor Salimullah Khan, Mofis Chaudhary, and many more young scholars of Bangladesh are coming up. Sometimes it is said that translation work might destroy the flavor of the real work. But the translation of Shakespeare's sonnet has got different dimension here. I would like to mention sonnet number 146 of Shakespeare, quote, "Within be fed, without be rich or no more," unquote. Professor Zillur Rahman Siddiqui sir translates it as, "Ondore ঐশ্বর্য আনো, ঝরে যাক বাহ্য অলঙ্কার." Professor Sarwar translates it, "মিটুক আত্মার ক্ষুধা, শরীরের জেল্লা আর নয়." And Professor Sudhendranath Datta of Kolkata translates it as, "মিটুক মর্মের ক্ষুধা, ঘন ঘটা অশ্রুতে গলুক." These translations may produce a different dimension in the translation work of William Shakespeare in Bangla. I would also like to mention Professor Mohit has done in his comedy play Hamlet a very interesting idea that he has inscribed in the mind of the readers. The play was published in the Daily Star in 2010. He has assembled all the most popular characters like Hamlet, Macbeth, Antony, Polonius, Iago, Desdemona, Cleopatra, Ophelia, etc. The settings of the play are Dhanmondi Lake and the lobby of a private university. Reading the play creates a kind of refreshment of the mind. A new thought peeps into the mind if those are from Bangladesh background, and a comedy drama that might happen. How does it look like? It was definitely a happy reading. Now I would like to look at the psychological point of view of Shakespeare's writing and its impact in Bangladesh. In the study of psychology, Othello syndrome refers to a person experiencing illogical and unfounded rage, and it is called, quote, morbid or delusional jealousy. This is a psychiatric disorder exhibiting obsession, delusion, violent tendencies, and is often associated with a mental illness. Obviously, the term is taken from Shakespeare's famous tragedy Othello, where the Moor Othello has murdered his beloved wife Desdemona because of his poisoned ears and plotted by Iago. Based on this theme, Bangladesh Television and the private TV channel of Bangladesh have telecast Othello and Othello syndrome. The concept of the plays that is the jealousy of the spouses and its impact in life. These two dramas have got immense popularity in our country. Finally, I'd like to say the Bard of Avon remains and will remain in the hearts of the scholars, translators, editors, playwrights, readers, and audiences of Bangladesh, and keeps continue inspiring them to adapt the universality of his plots, themes, and characters. More adaptation of Shakespeare's works in Bangladesh will make the literature lovers more enthusiastic to read and associate Shakespeare's creation in Bangla culture. Finally, I would like to end with the quotation of eminent Professor Fakrul Alam sir. He says, quote, "Beginning of our fascination for Shakespeare can be accentuated through reimagining them for our students in Bangladeshi situations," unquote. Thank you very much. We hope that there will be more adaptations of the works of William Shakespeare. So we will enjoy his works more from the ground of our country perspective. Thank you very much. Stay at home, stay safe. Thank you.
Hello, dear audience. William Shakespeare does not need any introduction. He is globally acclaimed English playwright, poet, and actor. His works, including collaborations, consist of some 39 plays. My topic is the sources of Shakespeare. I would like to say something on 3 points: the books he borrowed from, and his collaboration with other playwrights. There exist lots of scholarly debates on how far Shakespeare borrowed. Consequently, a question surfaces, and that's my 3rd point: whether Shakespeare plagiarized in the modern sense. Now, if we answer this question in one word, a big no. It is true that he used stories and plot lines that had been used before, but that can't be blamed as plagiarism. It was a popular tendency in the Middle Ages and for quite long time afterwards. Reusing other people's plot lines and well-known stories was not only respectable, but actually expected by the audience. In that sense, Shakespeare fulfilled the audience's expectations. So blaming Shakespeare for plagiarism would be anachronistic, because the very concept didn't exist at that time. And there was no such concept during his lifetime. If the plotline is someone else's, we mustn't forget that his words are his own. All we can say, he borrowed generously. He particularly didn't borrow from any 1 or 2 writers. He borrowed from many. His aim was to produce the very best in the theatrical entertainment. He did it by finding, by absorbing, and utilizing the very best ideas and the best forms of expressions from numerous great writers. He didn't copy paste in the technical sense, the way now we say. He rather manipulated the old sources, and we can say he reinvented them. He improved his borrowed materials. When Shakespeare wrote plays based on earlier works, he changed them quite drastically. He introduced new characters and new incidents, and in most of the cases, he radically changed them so that the original stories are sometimes hardly traceable. That's where Shakespeare's genius lies. Scholars believe nearly all of Shakespearean plays are based on pre-existing stories. A Midsummer Night's Dream and the subplot of Twelfth Night are rare exceptions to these. Shakespeare wrote plays with original plots. Only 2, Love's Labour Lost and The Tempest. For all his other works, he borrowed plots from the other writers. He frequently changed them by reordering events, by inserting subplots and adding or removing characters. One of his greatest plays is Hamlet. Shakespeare's main source is believed to be an earlier play, known today as the Yo Hamlet. It was possibly written by Thomas Keat. The Ur Hamlet would have been in performance by 1589, and it was the play which first included a ghost in the story. The book he depended mostly, or heavily we can say, for plot ideas was Holinshed's Chronicles. The book was published in 1577. The Chronicle is a collaborative work written by Raphael Holinshed and others. The volume includes histories of England, Scotland, and Ireland from the earliest time in invitation to the mid-16th century. The Chronicle served as Shakespeare's sources for nearly all of his history plays. The plot of Macbeth also came from the Chronicles, as did elements for King Lear and Cymbeline. Shakespeare's second most important source was a book by Roman historian Plutarch. The title of the book is The Lives of the Novel Greeks and Romans. Researchers agree that Shakespeare may have read the book in the original Latin, but he definitely read Thomas North's English language translation. We know this because Shakespeare clearly based Julius Caesar, Antonio and Cleopatra, Coriolanus, Timon of Athens on North's translation. A close reading may reveal Shakespeare followed very closely North's phrasing in some particular scenes. And aside from these major works, Shakespeare also borrowed from dozens of other writers. He borrowed many plot ideas from Italian writers, especially from a medieval collection of stories called Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. He also borrowed from Roman writers, especially Ovid, Seneca, and Plutarch, and from these great medieval English poets, namely Geoffrey Chaucer and John Gower. He even updated stories that had been popular just a few decades earlier. He even updated stories that had been popular just a few decades earlier. For instance, The Winter's Tale was based on a much-loved narrative published 1588 by Robert Greene, and Romeo and Juliet is closely based on a long narrative poem by Arthur Brooke that was published in 1560s. Shakespeare also occasionally drew inspiration from current events. Although the plot of Tempest has no predecessors or precursor, Shakespeare based the catastrophic storm that opens the play on accounts of a shipwreck that occurred in Bermuda in 1609. He also interwove thematic elements from works by his contemporary Ben Jonson, the Roman poet Ovid, and the French essayist Montaigne. Shakespeare was an avid reader, and he took inspiration from everything he read. Among them, some writers influenced him strongly. The important influence was Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe pioneered the use of blank verse, the form Shakespeare uses in all his plays. Like Shakespeare, Marlowe also portrayed complex tragic characters on the stage. And the French essayist Montaigne was another important influence on Shakespeare's plays. Montaigne's essays deal a wide range of ideas, and Shakespeare's plays often explore similar ideas. In The Tempest, for instance, Gonzalo imagines the Commonwealth he would create if he ruled the island where the play is set. His speech closely follows a passage from Montaigne's essays of the Cannibals. So Shakespeare's sonnets, in particular, would not have been possible without the work of the 14th century Italian poet Petrarch. Shakespeare also knew the work of other English poets inspired by Petrarch, including Sir Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser, who were both favourites of Queen Elizabeth. Edmund Spenser wrote influential narrative poems such as The Shepherd's Calendar and The Fairy Queen. But by far, the biggest influence on Shakespeare's own narrative poems is the epic Metamorphosis by Roman poet Ovid. Metamorphosis was often studied at schools like the one Shakespeare probably attended in Stratford. And Shakespeare showed a deep knowledge of Ovid in his poems. Now let me focus on some of the Shakespeare's collaborators. Shakespeare collaborated for practical reasons. Playwriting was a kind of teamwork at that time, and there was division of labors, and different members of the team were especially good at different tasks. Shakespeare's conversations with other writers and artists, the interviewing of his creativity with theirs, interweaving his creativity with the other collaborators, began in his own lifetime. His last three plays were all co-written with Fletcher. Recent scholars have argued that The three parts of Henry VI, as well as Titus Andronicus, show Shakespeare working with more experienced playwrights such as Thomas Keat, George Peele, and even Christopher Marlowe. So, early and late in his career, Shakespeare worked with other playwrights. In the middle, the playwrights seem to have worked with him, or at least worked on his scripts. The playwright Thomas Middleton had a hand in Macbeth, probably in Timon of Athens, and likely in both Measure for Measure and All's Well That Ends Well. No doubt, there are other collaborations in Shakespeare's canon. That is the way, as we have already said, plays were composed. The plays of the Elizabethan theatre were not written, by single-handedly. Okay, that was not the fashion. So, the most important surviving document testifying today how plays were written in Shakespeare's time shows that nearly two-thirds of the plays mentioned are in some sense collaborative. A team of playwrights might have completed a script by writing one act at each, as was the case for the play. Now, let's conclude with the question once again. Did Shakespeare copy from others? The short answer is no. We must keep in mind that there is no such thing as an original story. All stories follow certain pattern and forms. The details can be changed, but the underlying story remains the same. From that sense, if we blame Shakespeare of stealing other writers' work, it would be like blaming every single writer who has ever written. So, our conclusion is Shakespeare is not only the best playwright in English language and literature, he is the best playwrights in all languages across the globe. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, dear audience and viewers. This is Ghazi Shahadat Hossain, Assistant Professor, Department of English Language and Literature, Premier University, Chittagong. I would like to welcome you all to this spectacular extravaganza to commemorate the 457th birth anniversary of William Shakespeare. On this grand occasion, I would like to give a short talk on the issue of pandemic and William Shakespeare. As all of us know that a bubonic pandemic has been plaguing the whole world for more than 1 year, and around 4 million people have already died. As a student of literature, a key issue that haunts me is that how this pandemic issue features in literature, especially in the works of William Shakespeare. While preparing this talk, I have used several resources, particularly two articles, one titled What Shakespeare Actually Wrote About the Plague by Stephen Greenblatt, published in the New Yorker. Another article titled Shakespeare and Pandemic by B.S. Ravi, published in the New Indian Express. While pondering over the issue of pandemic and literature, the first play that pops up in my mind is Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. When the play opens, we see a worried king, the King Oedipus of Thebes, meets a group of trouble-torn citizens and a priest who report him about the appearance of a deadly pestilence. Let me read out some of the lines from Oedipus Rex. For our city, as you yourself can see, is badly shaken. She cannot raise her head above the depths of so much surging death. Disease infects fruits, blossoms in our land. Disease infects our herds of grazing cattle, makes women in labor lose their children. And deathly pestilence, the fiery god, swoops down to blast the city, emptying the house of Cadmus. Even Shakespeare, one of Shakespeare's contemporaries and one of the university with Christopher Marlowe makes a reference to the plague in his much popular play, The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus. We see Dr. Faustus, the protagonist of the play, boast of his expertise as a legendary medical practitioner. He says, "Is not thy common talk sound aphorisms? Are not thy bills hung up as monuments, whereby whole cities have escaped the plague and thousands of desperate maladies been eased?" Even after hundreds of years of William Shakespeare, John Keats mentions the ravages of plague in his much popular Ode to a Nightingale. Let us read a few lines from Ode to a Nightingale. "The weariness, the fever, and the fret, where palsy shakes a few sad, last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies." While writing these lines, he must be thinking of the ravages of plague. We know that both of his parents, Keats's parents, died of tuberculosis, and his brother Tom died of tuberculosis, and ultimately he himself died of tuberculosis. And we also know that Keats considered William Shakespeare as a deity presiding over him while writing Endymion. Let us talk something about the time of Shakespeare. As we come to know from historical records that a plague broke out in London in 1564, and it came to London, it came to the city of William Shakespeare, Stratford-on-Avon, on July 11 the same year. The city had a population of 1,000, and the plague took the lives of 200. But the plague didn't continue its ravages forever. With the help of strict quarantines and a change of weather, it would wane for some time and life would be normal. But after an interval of some years, it would return with little or no warning, and it was terrifyingly contagious. Some of the common symptoms were chill, coughing, extreme weakness, exhaustion, leading to diarrhea, vomiting, bleeding from mouth and nose, and that would inevitably be the results. And many preventive measures were suggested. One was to kill all the dogs and cats, which was totally ineffective because the plague was actually spread by red-born fleas. Some of the other remedies suggested were the use of the smoke of dried rosemary, bay leaf burning in the chafing dish, and burning of old shoes, and social distancing. People were seen sniffing oranges stuffed with cloves, pressed against nose. It was perhaps a substitute of modern day mask. Various forms of mass gathering, archery contest, feasts were banned, with the exception of church services. It was believed that it was impossible to be affected with this pandemic in the act of worship, although those who were infected were asked not to attend church services. Now, one of the interesting things is that although the town of Shakespeare was badly shaken because of this bubonic plague, Shakespeare's life was spared. Neither Shakespeare nor his family members were affected. That his life was spared of this plague was considered to be an example of divinity shaping the affairs of human existence. Surprisingly, these realizations didn't affect Shakespeare at all. He was totally indifferent to this plague, and it didn't feature in his plays strongly. Even one of his contemporaries, Thomas Nash, one of the university wits, expresses the horrors of plague in one of his poems titled A Litany in the Time of Plague. Let me read out some of the lines. Rich men, trust not in wealth. Gold cannot buy you wealth. Physic himself must fade. All things to end are made. Plague full swift goes by. I'm sick, I must die. Lord, have mercy on us. Beauty is but a flower which wrinkles will devour. Brightness falls from the air. Queens have died young and fair. Dust have crossed Helen's eyes. I'm sick, I must die. Lord, have mercy on us. So, except Romeo and Juliet, in which the pandemic impacts the course of events, Shakespeare didn't attach much importance to the pandemic, and it didn't preoccupy him. He referred to it in a number of plays such as Macbeth, King Lear, Twelfth Night, Much Ado About Nothing, Timon of Athens, and Coriolanus, but it came there merely as an exclamation or metaphorical expression of rage and disgust. Sorry. Shakespeare, whose life was narrowly escaped from the plague during the time of his infancy, and who had to grapple with economically devastating closing of theatre, was unique, concentrating solely on the historical incidents, disregarding the contemporary events. Greenblatt mentions that there were particularly severe outbreaks of plague in 1582, 1592 to 93, 1603 to 4, 1606, and 1608 to 9. And referring to the theatre historian J. Leeds Barrow III, he concludes that from 1606 to 1610, the period when the bard wrote and produced his greatest plays such as Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, The Winter's Tale, The Tempest, the playhouses were unlikely to have been open for more than 9 months. I have already mentioned that pandemic appears in the plays of William Shakespeare not as a representation of extreme horror, but as a metaphorical expression of anger and disgust, and also as a means of creating comic effects. And he portrays it as a familiar and inescapable feature of daily life. Some of the recurrent expressions referring to the plague are a plague of sighing and grief, it blows a man up like a bladder. A plague upon it when the thieves cannot be true to one another. A plague upon this howling. A plague of this picker herring. Bubonic plague, which was so deadly and catastrophic, which caused so many casualties, has been converted into an agreeable metaphor of lovesickness in Twelfth Night when Olivia surprises at the speed she falls in love. Let me read out some of the lines. How now, even so quickly may one catch the plague? Methinks I feel this yours perfection with an invisible and subtle stealth to creep in at mine eyes. Well, let it be. So, dear audience, that's all from me. Thanks for viewing and listening to my talk patiently.
Hello audience, welcome to Universal Shakespeare, the program which is organized by DEL, Department of English Language and Literature, Premier University, to mark William Shakespeare's 457th birth anniversary. As I'm a part of the program, I'm Rafiqul, Assistant Professor of English Language and Literature, DEL. I'm going to deliver my topic, and my topic is chess in Shakespeare or chess and Shakespeare, which is why you see me I'm sitting in front of a chess board and with chessmen beside this. And I have got 3 books with me. You see, this is complete works of Shakespeare. And then I have got a book of chess, Encyclopedia of Chess Opening Theories. There are many books like this. And then I have got, you see, the book, The Tempest. This is the tragedy, you see, tragicomedy written by Shakespeare, where Shakespeare makes, you see, direct mention of chess, creating a chess scene here in the drama, which is why these are here with me. Before getting to this heart of the topic, let me talk a little on the chess, on the game of chess. You know, chess is a very ancient game to be introduced here in, you see, the subcontinent by 550 AD, or perhaps much earlier than that. And then it was taken to the Persians, which was in the subcontinent. His name was Satranj, and in Persia, the Persians, you see, brought about good changes and development of the game. Then from the Persians, it was taken to the Arabs, and Arabs brought about huge changes and developments of the game. And from the Arabs, it reached the center of the civilization, the Europe. And in Europe, chess culminated to the present-day standard game of chess, the very mind game, engaging and universal and versatile and most appealing popular game, which is being played by the millions of people across the globe till now. With this, dear audience, let me talk a little. I have to talk about, you see, the connection between chess and literature. We all know literary giants or figures, writers and the poets and the dramatists of the globe have used or exploited chess in their literary works in different many ways. At the same time, if you think of the Russian writers, for example, Tolstoy used to play chess, and there are many others who actually loved the game and played it. And you know, the German poet, the great poet, great Goethe, once told chess is the touchstone of intellect. And some others say that chess is the gymnasium of mind. So this is the versatility of the game itself, which of course, was so popular, and Shakespeare, the master dramatist, could not, did not spare the game itself. He exploited the game, used the game in many ways, for example. For example, the vocabulary of Shakespearean dramas abound, chess vocabulary abounds in Shakespeare's drama. Kings, for example, kings, queens, bishop, knight, and then pawns, and then castle, for example. These all are there in his works. And then direct mention is made here in The Tempest, where in act number 5, Shakespeare creates a chess scene. I'm taking you to the lines that are there in the drama. Yes, in act number 5, scene number 1, in Tempest, here Prospero discovers Ferdinand and Miranda playing at chess. Miranda: "Sweet lord, you play me false." Ferdinand: "No, my dearest love, I would not for the world." Miranda: "Yes, for a score of kingdoms you should wrangle, and I would call it fair play, if this proof." Alonso: "A vision of the island, one dear son shall I twice lose." For Sebastian: "A most high miracle." Ferdinand: "Though the sea is threatened, they are merciful, I have cursed them without cause." So this is what the scene is about. You see, what is happening here is of deep interest and attention. You see, dear audience, as Miranda says that, or accuses Ferdinand of playing false. That means, of course, the fact that Miranda knows chess. but our curiosity rises at the immediately for the fact that, you see, while Ferdinand was educated at the heart of the Renaissance European court, you see, and he used to learn the cultural manners. On the other hand, Miranda, in her most of the time, was marooned, you see, in a distant island, and lived with her father. So how come that she should learn chess? She did not know the European culture and manners. The answer to this riddle is that she learned chess from his wise father Prospero, and it has a ground because of the fact that Prospero is the person is such a wise, he knows almost everything. With this, dear audience, I need to tell so that you can understand the vocabulary that abounds in Shakespeare's works. This is we call king in English and standard chess, and king is the center of the game, and then this is queen, and it is most powerful piece here on the board, and this is bishop, and this is knight, and then this is rook, and then this is pawn. So all these names are English and standard names, which we need to understand. And chessboard is a 64 square board, and there are 8 files and 8 ranks with 32 pieces on it. With this, dear students, dear audience, I will take you to now the images that I have arranged for you, so that your understanding of the whole thing becomes further clear. Let's get to it. Yes, dear audience, we are here with the images here on the slide. The first image is about Universal Shakespeare with the portrait of the great dramatist on his 457th birth anniversary. And one is about me and the title of the topic. Third one is again Shakespeare with some very powerful lines here. I feel like reading them for you. References to chess vocabulary abound in Shakespeare with frequent use of words such as king, queen, castle, knight, bishop, check and mate. The most suggestive usage occurs in Act 2 of King John, that thou mayest be a queen and check the world. Very powerful indeed, you see. Thou mayest be a queen and check the world. However, such vocabulary works equally well outside the chess context. Let's see the next one. This is very interesting. Again, the portrait is all about Ferdinand and Miranda playing chess in Tempest, but this is some illustration or discussion or analysis of this scene, which is very powerful here. You see the way Shakespeare has devised the composition of the scene in words is very enticing. Shakespeare wrote this chess scene composed of 64 words, like 64 squares on a chessboard, in 8-line verse lines, 8 rows and 8 files, just like a chessboard. Each section is arranged in 2 equal parts of 32 words, like 32 pieces in a chess game. Audience, I earlier told you and showed you the files and ranks of the board. So this is what the unique aspect of Shakespeare that he has done in creating the scene in Tempest, that immediately directly tells about his knowledge of the game as well as his fascination of the game. Let's see the next one. This is the discussion on the scene that I have read, and analysis is there. I'm skipping. And again, this is what the scene and little discussion is there. Then this continues with a little colorful image. Beautiful it is, two are playing. So here, tell this, dear audience, You see, what is very important, point about the whole scene is that it has got twofold meaning actually. One is Shakespeare creates the scene maybe to show his fascination for the game. At the same time, it has a moral purpose. What is that? It is, as Miranda and Ferdinand were to be wedded, they were supposed to be get married. Prospero wants them to be chaste, and which is why he engages them in a game which is enticing and engaging until they are getting married or wedding. This is what the beauty and then beautiful aspects of the game. And then this image is again on the chess scene. But again, interestingly, that very discussion is there. Shakespeare's text is calligram. It's a calligram, a genuine chessboard composed of 64 words in 8 verse line, corresponding to the right 8 divisions on each side and of the chessboard, and arranged in 2 equal parts of 32 words. I'm repeating this because it is what the beautiful point and crux of the whole thing that refers to Shakespeare's understanding of the game and liking of the game. And then let's get to the next image and discussion. And this is very interesting picture. It is from a chess literature, where we can see a hand is holding a piece. Reportedly, it is Shakespeare playing against Ben Jonson, and he is holding a piece to play. And then this is the game played between these two. Ben Jonson is playing white, while Shakespeare is playing black, and Shakespeare is with that piece at hand going to take white's queen at c3, and you see this rook holds the file, and bishop from here to there takes the queen and gives a check and mate. So this is what the beautiful image that confirms the fact that he used to play chess with Ben Jonson. This is another image of a game created by the literature, chess magazines between the two characters of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. Then there is another portrait which is again on Shakespeare playing chess. Then this is a correspondence match. Description is there in notations. Annotations is very interesting. Here what is there? While I'm reading the lines from different pieces of Shakespeare. First one, I do the wrong and the first begin to brawl, Richard the Third. Second one, here comes the queen whose looks brewery her anger, Henry the Fourth. Number third, our castle's strength will laugh as siege to scorn, Macbeth. Then, now let us join our powers, Henry the Fourth comes and with a little pin, bores a hole through his castle wall, Henry the Fourth. The pin word is very interesting here. It refers to the one technical aspect of the game where a bishop pins a knight or something like this. So a mention of the pin refers to the fact that again, very loudly, unequivocally, that Shakespeare knew the game. And then last one, victorious Talbot, thou art not less than thy fame that had bruited thee, Henry the Fourth. Then let's get to the next one. This is what the vocabulary of Shakespeare that relates to chess. It is possible that Shakespeare knew about chess and made allusions and chess puns throughout his other plays. Here are a few examples. The list of the example is huge. I curtail many, but I'll be reading a few lines very quickly so that you can understand. So thou hast no unkind mate, comedy of errors. Mate is the word. Not mad, but mated. Comedy of errors, Act 3, Scene 2. I think you are all mated. You see the word mated, he made pun on the word. And this way it goes. Here some lines. What is the king and queen do mean to hawk? King Henry the Fourth, Act 1, Scene 1. And then, be poisonous too and kill thy forlorn queen. King Henry the Fourth, Sixth rather. And then, Castle seize gentle queen. These exhortations, King Henry the Sixth, Act 3. So this way, I'm coming to the end of the discussion with the line I'm reading. This is my king, King Henry the Sixth, Act 5, and make him oppose himself against his king. And then the king and all the peers are here at hand, King Henry. So this way, dear students, I have come to the conclusion of the presentation of my topic, Chess and Shakespeare. Thank you very much.
It is now the very witching time of night, when chariots yawn and hell itself breathes out contagion to this world. Now could I wring hot blood and do such bitter business as the day would quack to look on. Soft. Now to my mother. O heart, lose not thy nature. Let not ever the soul of Nero enter this fond bosom. Let me be cruel. Not unnatural. I will speak daggers to her, but use not my tongue and soul in these hypocrites. How in my words soever she be shamed, to give them seals, never my soul consent.
Yet, here's a spot. Out? Damn spot. Out, I say. One, two. Why then? 'Tis time to do it. Hell is murky. Fie, my lord, fie. A soldier and feared? What need we fear who knows it, when none can call our part to account? Yet, who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him? The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where's she now? What will these hands never be clean? No more of that, my lord. No more of that. You mar all with this study. Yes, the smell of the blood is still. perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh. Wash your hands. Put on your nightgown. Look not so pale. I tell you yet again, Banquo is buried. He cannot come out on his grave. To bed, to bed. There is knocking at the gate. Come, come. Come, come. Give me your hand. What is done cannot be undone. To bed. To bed.